The galaxy viewed Darth Vader as an invincible shadow, yet there are many moments when he narrowly escapes his own destruction. While his armor made him a symbol of terror, it also functioned as a walking tomb that failed him during his most critical battles. These moments of vulnerability found in both canon and legend sources reveal that the Sith Lord was never as untouchable as the Empire claimed. Exploring the canon timeline first, these enemies and encounters pushed the Sith Lord to the brink of absolute mechanical and biological failure. In the canon film Revenge of the Sith, the story of how Darth Vader almost died begins with the total failure of Anakin Skywalker at the hands of Obi-Wan Kenobi. This was not a quick accident, but the result of a long, exhausting chase across the fires of Mustafar. Obi-Wan knew that he could not win by strength alone. He had to be smarter. He understood that Anakin was blinded by a new, dark power that made him feel invincible. The Jedi Master stayed on the defensive, waiting for the one mistake that would allow him to end the fight. It happened when they reached the banks of a lava river and Obi-Wan realized that the geography of the planet was his best weapon. The Jedi Master leapt onto a high, stable bank of dark sand. By doing this, he gave himself the high ground, an advantage that changed the direction of the fight. He also knew it would provoke Anakin into acting recklessly. When he tried to leap after Obi-Wan, he left himself completely open. In that split second, Obi-Wan delivered a strike that would define the rest of Vader's life. The Jedi Master severed Anakin's legs and his remaining arm, sending the young Sith tumbling down the slope towards the edge of the molten river. As Anakin came to a stop just inches from the lava, the near-death event moved into its critical phase. Obi-Wan did not deliver a final blow, but stood and watched as the environment began to destroy the Chosen One. Anakin couldn't crawl away and protect his face from the rising ash. Obi-Wan spoke to him one last time, expressing his heartbreak while Anakin's body deteriorated, engulfed in flames. Obi-Wan believed the fight was over. He knew Anakin couldn't survive those injuries without immediate, advanced medical help, something that was nowhere to be found on Mustafar. Obi-Wan picked up Anakin's lightsaber and walked away, leaving the man he once called a brother to be consumed by the volcanic smoke. For a long time after Obi-Wan left, Vader lay on that bank. His body was shutting off from the pain of the burns and the lack of oxygen. He was alone in a hellscape, left for dead by the person who knew him best. The only thing that kept him from dying before the Emperor arrived was a terrifying amount of willpower. He used his hatred of Obi-Wan as a way to stay conscious, manually forcing his failing organs to keep working. If Obi-Wan had stayed for just 5 more minutes to ensure the heat finished its work, the story of the Sith Lord would have ended that day. When the Emperor finally found him, Vader was barely clinging to life. His survival was a medical miracle that required him to be encased in the famous black suit just to keep his ruined body from falling apart. This first near-death experience established a pattern for the rest of his life. He would always be a man who was only alive because of a machine, and he would always carry the physical and mental scars of the day Obi-Wan Kenobi dismantled him. The Jedi Master had not only taken his limbs, he had taken his ability to exist in the world as a normal human being. The fires of Mustafar left Vader trapped in a test version of his suit, one that would soon be pushed to its limits by a Jedi hermit. In the comic series Darth Vader of canon continuity, the Sith Lord faced a Jedi Master named Kashyyyk during a mission to secure a Kyber crystal. This hunt took place shortly after the events on Mustafar. This early armor was a prototype that had never been tested in actual combat. It was heavy, loud, and had a major problem with response time. Every time Vader tried to move his arm or leg, there was a small delay between his brain and the motors in the suit. Kashyyyk was a master of combat who had spent years in isolation training his body for speed. He saw the flaws in the suit immediately. He realized that Vader was essentially a pilot inside a slow, clanking machine. The Jedi Master focused his attacks on the mechanical joints and the power supply of the suit. He understood that a machine is only as strong as its weakest part. During their fight on the side of a mountain, Kashyyyk used the Force to drop a huge amount of weight on Vader's leg. He specifically targeted the left knee. The metal housing around the joint crushed inward, cutting the hydraulic lines. Without the fluid that powers the leg, The suit became a weighty anchor. Vader lost his balance and fell, leaving him completely open for the Jedi to deliver a finishing blow. Kashyyyk then used the Force to blast Vader off the side of the mountain. The fall was hundreds of feet, and the impact caused the life support system to shut down entirely. Vader's scarred lungs stopped receiving pressurized air, and he began to suffocate in the dirt. He was paralyzed because his mechanical limbs were no longer receiving power from the central computer. He lay there with sparks flying from his armor, unable to move, while his vision started to go dark. While Kashyyyk and Phyllis stood on the mountain above and prepared to leave, Vader was experiencing a clinical shutdown. The most powerful person in the Empire was reduced to a heap of broken metal and failing flesh. He was alone in a canyon with no medical droids and no way to call for help. The Jedi Master believed he had ended the threat. He assumed the fall and the lack of air would finish the job within minutes. Vader stayed alive by using the Force to grab the parts of a training droid that had fallen with him. He didn't have tools, so he used the Force to rip his own suit open and manually rewired his own life support while he was on the edge of passing out. He forced the air pumps to start moving again and bypassed the broken circuits in his leg. He managed to stand up and climb back up the mountain to ambush Kashyyyk and Phyllis. He won the fight, but he did it as a broken man who was literally held together by spare parts. The suit became a cage that could be turned against him at any time. Kashyyyk and Phyllis almost killed him by treating him like a vehicle that could be disabled rather than a person. If the Jedi had followed him down to the bottom of the canyon to verify the kill, Vader would have been a defenseless target. The Jedi Master's decision to walk away allowed Vader the time he needed to perform his own emergency repairs. It was a close call that forced Vader to realize that he would always be dependent on a fragile set of electronics. Every battle from that point on was a race to kill his enemies before they could find the right button to press on his chest. It wasn't much later when a challenge would take away the battlefield and replace it with something far more unexpected: a hunt. One of the strangest tests of Darth Vader's mortality appears in the canon comic series Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith. The event begins with a test of power and strategy between Vader and Grand Moff Tarkin. Tarkin believed that understanding an opponent was the key to defeating them. He claimed that Vader's power could be studied the same way a hunter studies a predator. Vader decided to test that belief directly. He asked Tarkin to hunt him. Tarkin agreed to the challenge, repaying a debt he owed the Sith Lord. The test took place on the remote wilderness world of Chandar's Folly, where Tarkin assembled a team with specialized tracking equipment. Their objective was simple: locate Darth Vader and eliminate him. The Dark Lord entered the environment alone while the hunters pursued him as prey. Early in the hunt, Tarkin managed to seize Vader's lightsaber, forcing the Sith Lord to fight without his most recognizable weapon. Vader responded by turning off the respirator that produced his signature breathing, moving silently through the wilderness as he stalked the hunters who believed they were tracking him. What followed was not a duel, but a military hunt. Flamethrowers and slug throwers, along with coordinated attacks, pushed Vader into a survival scenario where he had to navigate hostile terrain while fending off multiple attackers. The hunters were attempting to do what few in the galaxy had ever tried, and that is to kill the Emperor's enforcer through discipline, numbers, and strategy rather than individual strength. The hunt demonstrated something important about Vader. While the armor made him physically imposing, his true advantage came from the Force. As the pursuit intensified, Vader turned the hunt back on his attackers, dismantling the hunters who had been sent to track him. Tarkin observed the entire operation closely. The test demonstrated his original theory: Darth Vader could be studied like any other predator. But it also confirmed something else. Hunting Vader was possible, but surviving him was another matter entirely. An ally's hunt may have demonstrated how strong Vader is outside of a duel, but the return of a ghost from his past would soon show how the Sith Lord's invincibility could be stripped away. In the canon TV series Obi-Wan Kenobi, the two met for a final duel on a desolate, rocky moon. This encounter was different from their fight on Mustafar, because Obi-Wan no longer felt the same hesitation to kill his former student. He understood that Anakin Skywalker was gone, and only the machine remained. During the height of the battle, Obi-Wan used the Force to lift hundreds of massive boulders and drop them directly onto Vader. The sheer weight of the rocks crushed the outer plating of Vader's armor and did serious damage to the life support systems hidden beneath the durasteel. The most critical point of the fight happened when Obi-Wan delivered a powerful attack that sliced through the right side of Vader's mask. The mask is a pressurized environment that helps Vader's scarred lungs take in oxygen. When the seal was broken, the internal pressure dropped instantly. Vader began to make a high-pitched wheezing sound as he struggled to pull air into his damaged chest. Through the jagged hole in the mask, Obi-Wan could see the pale, scarred face of the man he had left on Mustafar. Vader was no longer a terrifying figure of shadow. He was a dying man, leaning against a rock, barely able to stay upright, as his lungs began to fail. The Sith Lord's vision blurred. One of his eyes was exposed to the dusty, thin air of the moon, while the other was still looking at the computer-assisted screens inside his helmet. He tried to swing his lightsaber, but his movements were slow and shaky because the suit's power cells were being drained to keep the respirator moving. He was in a state of total physical exhaustion. Obi-Wan stood before him, watching as his former student gasped for air. The Sith Lord was so weak that both men knew he was one strike away from death. In a familiar fact, the Jedi Master chose to walk away and leave Vader to his fate. Once again, Vader didn't die because the Emperor's shuttle arrived to provide emergency medical care. Further delay would have caused permanent brain damage or heart failure. The rematch proved that the mask was the most vulnerable part of the Sith Lord's entire existence. In a Temple of Ancient Shadows years later, this weakness would be reopened by a student who knew exactly where the armor ended and her master began. In Canon's animated series Star Wars Rebels, Darth Vader traveled to the planet Malachor to recover an ancient Sith holocron. There, he was confronted by his former Padawan, Ahsoka Tano. Ahsoka possessed a deep understanding of Vader's original fighting style, so she knew that he relied on considerable power and heavy strikes. During their duel on the heights of a Sith temple, she used her agility to stay out of his reach. She focused on the Sith Lord's blind spots, forcing him to constantly rotate his bulky torso. This movement strained the motors in his waist and hips, causing the suit to grow hotter as the battle continued. The turning point of the fight occurred as the temple began to activate, filling the air with unstable energy. Vader was distracted by the temple's power source, which allowed Ahsoka to deliver a crosscut with her white lightsabers directly across his face. The blades tore open a large gap on the right side of his helmet. Instantly, the Sith Lord's breathing changed from a steady rhythm to a broken, wheezing hiss. Once again, Vader's internal electronics failed. The screens inside his helmet, which provided his only way of seeing the world, began to flicker and short out. Through the broken mask, Ahsoka could see a single yellow eye staring back at her. As the Sith temple began to overload, Ahsoka plunged her lightsabers into the floor. This caused the ground to crumble and collapse, sending Vader into the lower levels. Almost immediately, the temple's superweapon core exploded. While Ahsoka's whereabouts were unknown for years, the Sith Lord was found hours later, limping through the smoke of the destroyed temple, using his lightsaber as a cane. His suit was covered in deep gashes, and his respirator was making a grinding noise that signaled total mechanical exhaustion. Vader emerged from the temple ruins on Malachor as a broken machine, but his survival against a ghost of his past only earned him a brutal reprimand from his master. To Palpatine, a damaged apprentice was a failed investment, and he intended to test Vader's endurance by stripping him of the very technology that kept him alive. In the canonical comic series Darth Vader issue number 6, the Sith Lord faced a brutal punishment from his own master, Darth Sidious. This event took place after Vader failed to stop the rebels and began questioning the Emperor's secrets. Sidious decided to remind Vader that his life was a gift that could be taken away at any second. Without warning, the Emperor unleashed the Force against him, blasting Vader with lightning, crushing him with telekinesis, and pinning him helplessly against the wall. The attack ripped apart Vader's mechanical limbs, leaving him a shattered prisoner inside the armor that kept him alive. The encounter reached a deadly peak when Sidious continued to dismantle Vader piece by piece, tearing away his mechanical legs and right arm. Vader was left broken and helpless, while the Emperor demonstrated exactly how easily the machine that sustained him could be reduced to scrap. The Emperor then dragged the broken Vader back to the same volcanic bank on Mustafar where he had first been found. He left Vader there with his mechanical legs and right arm completely destroyed, mirroring the original injuries he suffered years before. Vader was in a state of constant suffocation. Because his mechanical limbs were shattered, he could not crawl or defend himself from the predatory creatures on the planet. He lay in the ash, a broken heap of wires, and scorched flesh. The survival of the Sith Lord came down to his ability to salvage old parts from nearby wreckage. He had to drag himself through the dirt, using only his one remaining hand, struggling for every breath of thin, hot air. Vader rebuilt his limbs using rusted scrap metal and parts scavenged from the ruined machinery around him. This was a punishment designed to show Vader that he was nothing more than a tool. He survived, but it showed that Sidious held the power of life and death over his enforcer. The suit was not just a mobile hospital, it was a leash. While his master sought to break his spirit through physical suffering, a new rival emerged who targeted the very circuitry of the suit, one that didn't rely on the Force. In the comic series Darth Vader issue 25 from the canon timeline, the Sith Lord faced a specialized threat from a cyberneticist named Silo. The scientist had worked extensively with advanced cybernetic systems and believed technology could surpass the power of the Force. During a confrontation aboard Silo's whale-like research vessel, the scientist used a remote control device to activate a hidden command designed to disrupt Vader's cybernetic systems. The entire suit entered a state of total paralysis. Vader was left stranding like a hollow shell, unable to move even a finger. Silo believed the Sith Lord was finished because the armor was the only thing keeping Vader's ruined body functioning. The scientist stood in front of him, explaining that a man who depends on a machine is nothing more than a slave to the person who controls it. It was a scene of absolute technical dominance. Vader retreated into his own mind and the deep power of the dark side. While his body was near shutdown, his consciousness remained active. He used the Force to push past the shutdown of his cybernetic systems, forcing his body to move through sheer will and rage. He broke through the control Silo had placed on his armor and turned the situation against him, destroying the scientist's operation. In the end, Vader used the Force to seize control of Silo's biological vessel and send it plunging directly into a nearby star. The creator failed to account for the power of the dark side, but a massive industrial explosion would soon demonstrate that raw physics could be just as deadly as a kill switch. In the Star Wars comic series from 2015, Darth Vader traveled to the Weapons Factory Alpha on Cymoon 1 to negotiate with a faction of the Hutt clan. The mission turned into a disaster when a group of rebels led by Han Solo and Leia Organa infiltrated the facility to destroy its power core. During the chaos, Han Solo took control of an Imperial AT-AT walker as the battle raged through the complex. The fighting triggered catastrophic damage throughout the facility as Luke Skywalker destroyed the power core and the factory structure began collapsing around Vader as explosions ripped through the building. Vader used the Force to hold back collapsing debris while the factory continued to tear itself apart around him. The explosion of the power core flattened the facility and buried the Sith Lord under the burning wreckage. The Sith Lord forced his way through the wreckage as the building burned around him. He emerged from the ruins of the factory with his cape shredded and his armor scorched, but his internal systems remained functional enough to allow him to return to his ship. Solo's actions showed that even a pilot who could not use the Force could push Vader into a breaking point. The industrial catastrophe on Cymoon 1 showed that even a factory could be a death trap. But the expanded history of the Legends continuity reveals even more brutal ways the Dark Lord was nearly buried forever. In the Legends novel Splinter of the Mind's Eye, Darth Vader tracked Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia Organa to an ancient temple on the planet Mimban. The objective was to recover the Kyber Crystal, a powerful artifact capable of increasing a Force user's power by 1,000-fold. During the ensuing confrontation, Vader first engaged Princess Leia. Although Leia briefly wielded Luke's lightsaber to defend herself, scoring minor superficial hits on the Dark Lord's armor, Vader's superior physical strength and reach quickly overwhelmed her. He used his armor to batter her defenses, eventually leaving her burned and incapacitated. However, the intervention of Luke Skywalker shifted the tactical nature of the duel from a standard interrogation into a life-threatening mechanical failure for Vader. The primary threat to Vader's life emerged when Luke took up the lightsaber. The proximity of the Kyber crystal combined with the guiding spirit of Obi-Wan Kenobi allowed the inexperienced Skywalker to fight with a level of proficiency that broke through Vader's defenses. Luke landed a direct strike that severed Vader's right mechanical arm at the shoulder. This caused an immense electrical surge that flooded his sensory processors, disrupting his balance and motor control. Vader was unable to maintain his footing on the temple's rain-slick floor. As Luke prepared a final blow, Vader lost his balance and fell into a deep mining pit within the temple floor. The suit's environmental regulators were not designed to withstand his surroundings, even more so in a compromised state. Upon reaching the bottom of the pit, the damp, high-pressure environment of Mimban's underground levels began to affect his internal system through the exposed wiring of his shoulder. The blow should have ended the duel, yet Vader refused to retreat. Even after losing the arm, the Dark Lord advanced again with his remaining strength, determined to end the fight before Luke could recover. The young rebel was already exhausted from the battle and the trials that had led them through the temple. For a moment, the outcome seemed inevitable. Vader closed the distance, raising his weapon as he stepped forward through the narrow chamber. Then the unexpected happened. As he moved across the slick stone floor, the wounded Sith Lord lost his footing and plunged into the dark pit that split the temple floor. Pushed to its breaking point, Vader's damaged armor sparked and failed as he fell deeper into the temple's mining pit. The fall ended the duel abruptly, leaving the Dark Lord stranded in the depths of Mimban's underground caverns, while Luke and Leia escaped the temple with the Kyber crystal. The fall into the pit prevented Luke from finishing the duel, but it also left Vader injured and temporarily trapped within the ruins of the temple complex. The disaster in the swamps of Mimban left the Sith Lord painfully aware of how fragile his new existence was. But a surviving Jedi would cross his path beneath the towering forests of Kashyyyk to exploit that fragility. In the Legends novel Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader, the Sith Lord traveled to Kashyyyk to hunt down a group of Jedi survivors. Among them was Roan Shrine, a veteran master who quickly identified the weaknesses in Vader's new, clunky form. This was one of the first times Vader faced a skilled duelist while still adjusting to the weight and sensory limitations of his armor. Shrine took advantage of the dense jungle environment to stay out of Vader's direct line of sight, forcing the Dark Lord to overextend his mechanical limbs and waste energy. The duel unfolded amid the wider fighting on Kashyyyk. Imperial forces were pushing deeper into the forest, while Wookiee resistance moved through the towering settlements built among the trees. The confrontation between Shrine and Vader took place high above the forest floor, using the narrow walkways that connected the immense trunks. The elevated paths left little room for error. A wrong step could send one of them dropping through open air towards the dense canopy below. Vader advanced with relentless strength while adapting to the limitations of his armored form. Shrine relied on movement and the shifting terrain, keeping distance whenever the Dark Lord attempted to close the gap. Shrine recognized that Vader's armor limited his speed and his ability to maneuver, allowing the Jedi Master to use the dense jungle terrain to keep distance from the Dark Lord's heavy strikes. Shrine managed to cause enough damage given time. The difficult terrain and Shrine's evasive fighting style forced Vader to adapt to the limitations of his newly constructed armor. In his early years, Vader was physically at risk from enemies who could outsmart the suit's weight and mechanical dependence. Vader held on by using the Force to lift huge piles of wood and debris and shattered bridge sections, crushing the platform where Shrine stood. By escalating the violence to a scale that Shrine could not parry, Vader ended the threat before his own systems could reach a point of total failure. This victory taught him to rely on overwhelming force power to compensate for his lack of physical grace. The duel on Kashyyyk revealed the flaws of a machine in a jungle, but the next encounter would see those mechanical flaws targeted by a Jedi who understood the man beneath the mask. In the novel series The Last of the Jedi from Legends Continuity, Darth Vader faced a unique threat in Ferrus Olin, a former rival from the Jedi Temple who knew the man inside the armor. During their confrontations, specifically on the planet Samaria, Olin did not rely solely on martial skill. Instead, he used psychological warfare, speaking of Padme Amidala and the life Anakin Skywalker had destroyed. This emotional assault disrupted Vader's meditative state, which is the very thing that allows him to maintain control over his labored breathing and mechanical movements. The name hit harder than any strike Olin could land with a blade. For a moment, the duel stopped looking like a contest between hunter and quarry. Vader advanced with visible anger, driving forward through the smoke and machinery of the industrial complex. Ferris gave ground, keeping space between them while the exchange continued. Each step forced Vader deeper into the chase, turning the fight into a moving confrontation rather than a clean lightsaber exchange. The physical crisis occurred when Olin exploited the suit's restrictive weight and the Sith Lord's distracted mind. In the high-stakes environment of Samaria's industrial sector, Olin managed to land strikes that damaged the suit's external interface. Without a calm mind to anchor his connection to the Force, Vader found his mechanical limbs becoming sluggish and unresponsive. For a moment, the Dark Lord was forced to contend with the reality that his armor was only as strong as his mental discipline. Vader survived by leaning into a primal, unfiltered rage that overrode his emotional conflict, allowing him to drive Olin back. While the Sith Lord eventually eliminates Olin later in the series, Olin managed to escape this particular confrontation by triggering chaos within the surrounding industrial complex and using the confusion to withdraw. The Sith Lord's suit was a big disadvantage, but his greatest weakness was the memories of his former life that could still compromise his focus. Arguably, he never truly managed to bury the identity of Anakin Skywalker. Ferris Olin exposed the cracks left behind by Anakin Skywalker. The next enemy would reach far deeper into forces older and far more dangerous than memory. In the crossover series Star Wars Vector, Darth Vader encountered Celeste Morn on a moon in the Coruscant system. Morn was a Jedi shadow who had been held in stasis for thousands of years while wearing the Mirror Talisman. This ancient artifact held the spirit of Karness Mirror, one of the original Sith Lords. The confrontation was not a standard duel, as Morn used the power of the talisman to turn Vader's own stormtroopers into mindless monsters known as Rakghouls. The confrontation shifted away from a simple duel. Imperial training and discipline offered little protection once the transformation began spreading through Vader's own ranks. Troopers who had entered the chamber as soldiers were turning into feral attackers that struck at anything nearby. What began as a clash between two Force users was quickly becoming a battlefield slipping beyond anyone's command. The primary risk to Vader was the corrupting nature of the talisman's alchemy. While his armor could stop most physical weapons, it had no way to block the dark magic that sought to warp his organic body. During the fight, the Spirit of Mir recognized Vader as a powerful host and attempted to bond with him. The talisman's influence attempted to overwhelm Vader's will, seeking to claim him as a host for the ancient Sith spirit. The power of the talisman clashed with Vader's own connection to the dark side as the spirit of Karness Mir attempted to dominate him. Vader found himself struggling against a force that moved through his armor like a virus. The suit's electronic components were not designed to resist the influence of ancient Sith sorcery. As Morn attacked with her lightsaber, the talisman continued to exert pressure on Vader's remaining limbs, attempting to turn his own flesh into a mutilated Rakghoul form. The suit's internal seals offered no protection against this biological and spiritual rot. The Sith Lord was forced to retreat when the numbers of mutated soldiers became too high and the talisman's power grew too great to manage. He left the moon without his troops, a rare moment where his technological power failed to overcome an ancient threat. The encounter left the armor sensors scrambled and the internal computer banks filled with corrupted data. The encounter demonstrated that ancient Sith artifacts could threaten Vader in ways that conventional weapons could not, forcing him to withdraw rather than risk being overtaken by the talisman's corrupting influence. The defeat at the hands of the ancient shadows was a humiliating reminder of his mechanical frailty, but his most personal brush with death would come from the very apprentice he had trained. In the Legends video game The Force Unleashed, Darth Vader faced his secret apprentice, Galen Marek. In a final confrontation aboard the incomplete Death Star, having trained Marek to be a weapon against the Emperor, Vader found himself at the receiving end of that training. During the duel, Merrick used a combination of levitation and devastating bursts of force lightning. These attacks stripped away the Dark Lord's defenses, physically throwing him through structural pillars and shattering the external plating of his armor. Merrick refused to let the Dark Lord regain the initiative. Each time Vader attempted to rise and counter, the apprentice drove forward again, forcing the fight into a relentless struggle. The momentum belonged to the younger warrior. Vader's strength still carried terrifying power in close quarters, yet Merrick met that power head-on, pressing the duel without hesitation. The encounter turned into a brutal contest of endurance as the apprentice pushed harder with every movement, determined to finish the battle before Vader could seize the advantage again. The critical threat occurred when Merrick unleashed a massive force explosion that heavily damaged the primary control unit on his chest. With his respirator exposed to the station's recycled atmosphere and his internal wiring sparking from electrical overload, Vader's physical strength evaporated. The suit designed to make him an unstoppable force became a big, sparking cage that left him completely at the mercy of his former student. Vader was left in a broken state on the floor, his mask shattered and one of his mechanical eyes exposed. The heavy damage to the suit's frame meant that he could no longer stand or fight back. The loss of control was one of the few times the Dark Lord was truly helpless. Vader only survived because Merrick lowered his weapon and spared him to reject the dark side. Following the hero's later sacrifice, the Emperor recovered his broken enforcer to begin the repair process. Workers had to replace the entire front plate of the mask and install new hardware to stop future lightning strikes from killing the wearer. The recovery was slow, as the lightning had caused new burns to the lungs that the suit could not easily fix. The duel with his apprentice showed that his own training could be turned against him, but his most savage encounter would involve a ghost of the Sith's past. In the legend story Resurrection, a group of darkside acolytes use ancient alchemy to bring back Darth Maul for a single purpose: to replace Darth Vader. The two Sith faced each other on the volcanic moon of Malachor 6. Maul's superior speed and double-bladed lightsaber effectively neutralized the Dark Lord's reach and strength. During the duel, Maul landed a series of devastating blows that carved through the armor plating of Vader's limbs and torso, causing electrical shorts and exposing the internal life support wiring. Maul fought with the relentless tempo that at once made him Sidious's most feared assassin. The Zabrak circled through the volcanic haze, striking from shifting angles, while forcing Vader to turn his armored frame again and again. Each movement carried weight, and the heavy armor forced Vader to rotate his entire frame to track the attack. Sparks flashed from the durasteel plates when Maul's blade skimmed the armor. The exchange turned into a brutal contest between speed and endurance as Maul pressed forward, searching for the opening that would end the fight before Vader's strength could close the distance. Maul got behind Vader and delivered a slash that pierced the midsection of the suit. This damage compromised the pressurized seals and threatened the integrity of the Sith Lord's respirator. With his system sparking and his physical power waning, Vader faced a situation where his technology was actively failing him against a faster, more agile opponent. He was standing on the edge of a lava pit, his life support sensors providing constant warnings of an imminent shutdown. But Vader performed a move that Maul did not anticipate. He ignited his own lightsaber through his own body to impale the Zabrak standing behind him. This act of extreme self-mutilation ended the fight immediately, marking the final time in the Legends timeline that a rival would push the Sith Lord to the point of total collapse. While his suit was a constant cage for Darth Vader, some survivors of the Jedi Order proved that the spirit is harder to break than metal. If you found the analysis of Vader's suit failures interesting, you will want to see what happens when the Master of the Purple Blade refuses to stay down. Watch out for our new channel featuring an original comic series about Mace Windu's survival after the fall of the Republic. The story follows the years he spent in the shadows as he witnesses the atrocities of the Empire. It is a look at a Jedi who saw the galaxy burn and chose a dark path to fight back.